Good evening from Singapore. My name is Camilla Hewitson and I work with S.E.A, which is delighted to be bringing you this talk series curated by our partner, ArtAsiaPacific, as part of our Sea Spotlight program. Thank you for joining us for this last session this evening. S.E.A is the anchor event of Singapore Art Week and is in its 4th edition. We are delighted to be showcasing over 170 artworks from 50 artists and 24 galleries. The platform is open to the public until this Sunday, which is the 23rd of January, at Tanjong District Park, and tickets are on sale for $10 for multiple entries. As well as our talks and tours, I just wanted to highlight that this year there is a specially curated fringe program at Projector X at Riverside Point, which is screening over 20 compelling artist-made films. There's a last chance to see this, which is tomorrow. But all the information on these exciting events can be found at our website, seafocus.sg. And it just leaves me to thank the speakers for joining us this evening and to hand over to our moderator, Elaine from ArtAsiaPacific. Elaine.
Thank you, Camilla. First, I would like to thank S.E.A Focus for inviting us to curate this series of talks, Pivot to the Future. This is the final panel of the 6, where we have discussed aspects of collaboration, the rise of the influencer, what it means to be an artist in the 2020s, the role of microspaces, and buying art in the virtual world. For tonight's panel, we will talk to 3 distinguished guests, Sylvain Lévy, Petch, Osathanugrah, and Chloe Suen, who all have long engagements with contemporary art. We will discuss collecting and patronage in maturing scenes across East and Southeast Asia, where both public and private museums are opening, and how they contribute to a vibrant cultural environment. Our panelists will also talk about the evolution of their roles within the art world, which go beyond buying art once or twice a year at auction or an art fair, and how owning artworks have inspired them to share their passion for art with the public, locally, regionally, and beyond. They will also tell us about their own specific initiatives and activities that pave the way for support and engagement with artists and their immediate communities and the general public. Here to speak about evolving collections in alphabetical order are Sylvain Lévy, a Paris-based collector who, together with his wife, Dominique, have assembled a collection of Chinese contemporary art called the DSL collection. By embracing innovative technologies, the Lévys encourage the public to discover and experience the works in their collection. The spirit of openness, nomadism, and sharing underpins the philosophy of the activities and the initiatives they choose to support. Petch Osathanugrah is the CEO of Osotspa, Thailand's biggest non-alcoholic drinks producer, as well as a chart-topping singer-songwriter who has been collecting international and Thai art for over 3 decades. Next year, Petch will unveil his private museum, DIB Bangkok, which will focus on contemporary art that explores spirituality, the human condition, and aspects of timelessness. And Chloe Suen is the chairwoman of her family's Simon Suen Foundation in Hong Kong. In 2015, she founded Sun Museum, the first nonprofit, non-governmental private museum in Hong Kong to promote Chinese and Hong Kong art. Chloe's public roles include serving on the Advisory Committee on Built Heritage Conservation, the Intangible Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee, and the Art Subcommittee of Hong Kong Government's Museum Advisory Committee of the Leisure and Cultural Services Department, and the Court, an advisory body of the Hong Kong Baptist Museum. I will begin by asking the panelists questions to start the conversation. And at any time, you can leave questions in the Q&A box, which you see at the bottom of your Zoom, and we will get to those towards the end of the panel. So to begin with, I would like to ask all of you to talk about how you began your collecting journey. How do you describe your own taste in art? and how that has evolved over time. So maybe, Petch, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'm not CEO of Osotspa anymore. I sold all of my shares and I got a lot more money to buy art. And so happy about that. I've been collecting contemporary art for over 30 years and both Thai contemporary and international in parallel. For example, like Muntien Bunma and David Sally, Francesco Clemente, Frank Stella, and yeah, along the way, there've been tons of mistakes, and the collection was quite eclectic, but I believed in my own eyes and my own taste, and I have an informal advisor who is an artist, or maybe two, but in the past 7 years, I have asked myself, what is the core of the collection? Because I cannot collect everything. And the answer was Muntien Bunma, who passed away like maybe 15 years ago. He was a revolutionary and amazing Thai contemporary artist. And because his work relates to spirituality, human condition and suffering. And therefore, I have tried to collect after the last, within the last 7 to 8 years, works from around the world that could have dialogue with the core of the collection. And so the collecting direction is, as Elaine has mentioned, timeless aesthetics. That's very important. And it relates to spirituality, and human condition. And lately, it has evolved to some more, I would say, cool or newer art, but that is not necessarily within that category that I described earlier. So I have included someone like Helen Martin, British artist.
So when you say cool, you mean hip?
Yeah, hip, but very deep. Helen Martin won the Turner Prize in England, maybe, if I remember correctly, maybe 2015. And also the Hepworth Sculpture Award. And she's an amazing artist. But the work look just the opposite of what I've been collecting. The work looks, the works look kind of chaotic, and at first glance, you wouldn't think that it's timeless at all. But I think her work, and including the works of other artists that I've been adding, would stand the test of time. And so it's so important that the criteria of collecting is like timelessness, to make sure that the work that you buy is not like you didn't buy it because you were impulsive, because the work are really deep and I hope would be able to stand the test of time.
All right, thanks, Petch. Chloe?
Hi.
Hi.
So I think my initial trigger for collecting definitely came from my family, as my father has been collecting for about 20-25 years. That's still not a very long time as a collector, but when he started out, of course, I was much younger and I didn't really understand. But as he grew his collection in modern Chinese modern ink, I spent a lot of time going to auctions and galleries with him. And I think from that, I slowly got, how do you say that?
Bug.
You got the bug. I think if I don't remember exactly at which point did I start thinking, oh, I'm going to start doing this with my own money. I think it must have been maybe 10 years ago when I started going to shows that I personally was more interested in, maybe more local contemporary artists, which is a slightly different population from his original collection. So once I started going to the shows, initially I think I just went with my guts, right? Just things that look nice to me, that I could afford. I started out very small. But as I observed the way he was collecting, and as I got to meet more experienced and seasoned collectors, I started thinking that maybe there needs to be a strategy around it. If there's a limited budget, you can't really just buy everything you like, and sometimes there are things you really, really love but you can't afford, right? I think that's the challenge of a young collector or a new collector sometimes. So as I began my journey 10 years ago, I think I would summarize it by saying that I started with just buying things that I liked emotionally. Slowly, I put a strategy around it to have some criteria, such as I wanted to support female artists specifically, not just financially, but also as a female collector. I do think female artists sometimes speak to me in a slightly different way. So I thought, that should be one of the criteria. And of course, sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. I have got into so many situations where I love a piece of work and I was like, oh, but it's not by a female. Can I buy it? It's not part of my collecting strategy. And sometimes you have to make a decisions about whether or not it fits into your collection, right? Not everything fits kind of in an Excel. So I think at this point, after about 10 years, I would say that the foundation is still for me, that I need to like the work enough to live with it. Sometimes when I talk to other friends who are about to start collecting, they would have a lot of more, I think, rational commentary on artwork, right? Oh, this looks like it's a good investment. I heard this art is going up. Should I buy it? And I always say that once you buy it, whether or not it goes up or down in value, you never know. We can't predict it, right? But can you live with this artwork if you were to keep it forever? Can you put it in your bedroom? Can you put it in your house? Can you put it in your office? So for me, I still have that as the foundation of how I collect. But on top of that, now I make sure that it fits in to a collecting strategy with certain criteria, such as being a Hong Kong artist or being a female artist. But I'm always expanding that or revising that, right? And the last part, which I'm trying to add more with experience now, is to really look at the value of the artwork in terms of its representation of art history. Is this artist saying something about our times that would become that would make this piece of artwork become important in the future? It might not be from a financial perspective, but maybe from an art history perspective. So I'm kind of slowly building it up as my experience increases. So that's how I would say it. In terms of taste, I think that's always changing. Sometimes I look at work that I bought 5 or 6 years ago. Now I look at it, I still like it, but I remember loving it more earlier on. But I think this, when you have a strategy or when you have a clearer set of criteria, even if your taste change in the future, then the piece of work still has strong reasons to stay in your collection. So that's kind of how I'm setting it up right now.
Thanks, Chloe. Sylvain? Are you on mute? Yes, there you are.
First, thank you very much for inviting me. And once again, it was very interesting to listen to the other persons. I think what makes the best part in collecting is the diversity and the diversity of the journeys and the way everybody is building his life around this idea of art and collecting. And I think it has to be respected and it has really to be encouraged in its diversity. Coming back to us, I shall say it's by accident that we begin to collect, because Dominique and myself were not coming from family of collectors, but my ex-brother-in-law was from a family of big collectors, very famous collectors in France, and he took us to visit galleries. And I shall say the addiction began like that. I think that what was interesting is that very, very quickly, because from my profile or my personality, what I like is to be challenged. I like to be challenged. I like to be challenged in my business. I like to be challenged in my life. What I like especially in contemporary art, was the idea that for me, contemporary, the notion of contemporary is to challenge the status quo. And you can be El Greco and still be very contemporary. You can be Picasso and be very contemporary. And you can be very young artist and be very old in terms of what you do. So what is interesting for me is this idea of always being challenged, and the artists are the best people to always challenge you, at least some of them. So this was why I was really very, very quickly connected with the idea of having a journey in the art world. I think that what I've learned with this art world is that what is interesting, when you decided to make it public, and you are not obliged to make a collection public. A collection can be a kind of secret garden. It can be a kind of book of your memories, and you are not obliged to I shall say, to share it if you don't want to share it. But we have decided with the Chinese collection to go into public, a kind of public collection. What is interesting when you become a kind of public collection, you cannot only speak of yourself. You have to be relevant for the others. You have to be relevant for the others. And this makes something very different in the way you build the collection. And to make it different from the others and to make it relevant for the others, you have to learn to speak the language of your time. This is very important. It's accessibility. Accessibility, it can be through space, it can be through the digital, but what is important is the accessibility in terms of how the message is transmitted and who you want the message to be transmitted to. And you said something interesting. It's not just about sharing a passion. I think what is interesting when you discuss, when you begin to be public, is how you can give food, how you can give food for the thoughts for the people and let them make their own cooking. And so once we have this kind of rules in our head, we have tried to make the best of the works we have collected, but also the way we were going to share it. And this brought us in 2005, with the beginning of YouTube, to be interested in the digital world. And so from this time, we always looked at how the audience was moving, how the artists were creating new types of medium, but also how we can be relevant also for ourselves, because what is important also, a collection is to make oneself happy. So this is a little bit, I shall say, the basic rules that we've applied since now 30 years of collecting. And to tell you the truth, I can really tell you that collecting can make an ordinary person have an extraordinary life. If you move from having to being, and if you move from being to having an attitude. And I think this is what we try to do.
Thanks, Sylvain. Speaking about reflecting the time, Petch, I wonder if you could describe the cultural milieu or the situation of Thailand when you first started collecting 30 years ago. How has Thailand evolved or changed in that respect?
Well, I think the art scene, the gallery scene in Bangkok, especially, there were no Thai art scene only in Bangkok, and there were only a few galleries. Were very small, and there was only one art institute, and I started collecting maybe 1985, 87, and I am not a real expert on the old art scene of Thailand. I know of the Thai art scene in the present day a lot more, but in early 90s, I was traveling to LA and New York, and then I got excited with international art. At the same, alongside that, I fell in love with some contemporary Thai art, but I would say that right now, the gallery scene in Thailand and in Bangkok is still underdeveloped compared to other Southeast Asian country like Indonesia or Singapore.
And so, I mean, in that respect that you talk about the scene being underdeveloped, and that your initial love was when you were traveling to places like New York or LA, now do you feel more compelled to collect and support art being produced in the Thai community? And if so, how do you do it? And why do you choose to emphasize Thai art and international art? And maybe it's a little presumptuous of me to think that maybe this is like Western art, and why, for instance, versus say Thai art alongside other art from Southeast Asia?
Okay. First, I am not compelled. I never felt compelled to support artists. If their works are not good, it's not worth it, to support them. I only buy works that would add value to the collection. And I am never speculative, meaning there is no investment agenda at all when I collect. And why do I collect international art alongside Thai contemporary art and no Southeast Asia? I think I am a bit ambitious, to be honest. I realized that I could never beat the public galleries or museum in Singapore or in Australia, and therefore, as a private collector and private museum, because DIP Bangkok will be a private museum, we could be different. If our vision is international art, and Thai contemporary art is a major part of the collection, but I would say in terms of numbers, maybe a lot, because Thai art are not so expensive, it's more affordable. But in terms of number of artists, I would say there are more international artists than Thai artists
in your collection.
Yeah, and so the vision is to be an exciting and one of the most cutting edge collection in the whole world. Not the best, but most exciting, meaning when you come into the museum, I hope that you will see something that you've never seen before. And not like just brand name artists, like, oh, that's Damien Hirst, oh, and so on. So I don't intentionally try to look for new artists and never try to look for emerging artists. But if emerging artists happen to, emerging art happen to be so strong, I don't mind collecting it. And I don't mind collecting like some undervalued art. And my collecting, I would say, strategy is to collect in depth. And therefore, it's too late to collect Warhol or Basquiat, so forget it, but I collect somebody like Cecilia Vicuña, like a Chilean artist based in New York, because her work is amazing and still affordable, and so on. And that's my collecting philosophy and strategy. And that's why I don't really support Thai contemporary art per se.
I see. Yeah, and so your museum is going to open next year.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, do you see the museum as a family endeavor, like which your children or nieces or nephews will inherit? How are you ensuring the museum's longevity?
Okay. My younger son, who's running the family office, which is the investment vehicle of the family, is very interested in art, and so fortunately, I think he will carry on, and I have two sons, and the older one is very artistic also, but maybe less into art. But the problem is the younger one, although he loves art, with the investment side, he also tried sometime, have to stop me from buying too much, or especially like if the works are like so expensive. But there will be somebody who carry on in the family, and I have set up a foundation, and the two sons are on the board of the foundation. But however, the collection is private. The collection will be called DIP Collection, and DIP Collection will lend to the museum, and the foundation will organize the exhibition.
So your family also has a private museum in Hong Kong, which is in a city which now boasts one of the most important museums, not just in Asia, but the world, and plus. And I wanted to ask you, what role does your museum serve? And what is the difference between running your own museum versus, say, donating your father's collection to, say, the Hong Kong Museum of Art or the University Museum and Gallery at Hong Kong U?
Sorry, my cat wants to join the panel. So actually, before I started, I just want to echo what Petch was saying. If your sons ever want to speak, I am also a second generation who's running the family office and constantly trying to stop my father from buying certain things that he wants to buy. So if they need to bounce ideas off, I'm happy to.
About how to control your father?
No. About how we can carry on the legacy with brain and hearts. That's what I always say. I think so going back to your question, Elaine, thanks for asking that. I think it's lovely and it's absolutely fantastic that Hong Kong has now gotten to a place where we have a much more vibrant museum scene. So we have always had I think for the last 15 years, we have had a pretty vibrant art commerce scene. So gallery, art basel, art trading, auctions, all of that. When we started the museum, so we conceptualized it back in 2012, and we started planning and setting it up in 2013. We opened in 2015. At that time, we were inspired by a lot of other corporates or family offices or just organizations that were setting up privately funded museums to promote arts and culture. And in contrast, at that time, we didn't see a lot of that effort in Hong Kong. So when deciding what we want our foundation to do in contributing to Hong Kong art scene, we thought about various options in terms of maybe doing a social enterprise, or maybe setting up workspace for artists, maybe just continuing our support for other people's exhibitions or foundations. But we really thought that what Hong Kong needed at that time was more exhibition space, curatorial exhibition space that would connect artists, collectors, and the public. So that's why we saw our role, and we continue to see our role as a privately funded museum, as a place where we have the flexibility to work with all type of artists, emerging, established, local, overseas, and all type of collectors. So as Petch and Sylvain mentioned, every collector has a different way of seeing the collection. Some of them don't want to set up something to have the public view them. Some of them want to have the public view them, but they don't know how to approach it. And at that time, Hong Kong only had the Hong Kong Museum of Art and Hong Kong Heritage Museum. So it was very hard for any artists or any collectors to just say, oh, let's put a show there. So our initial intention was to, even though it would be a small space, to add that to the Hong Kong art scene. So of course, fast forward 10 years, now we have a refurbished Hong Kong Museum of Art, which is much bigger, carry on much bigger shows. We have M+, who just opened, and then we just have so many more exhibitions and places for exhibition, and the Palace Museum, which will open next year. So I think at this point, what we see our updated role is to continue to have that flexibility and to continue to work with organizations or individuals who might otherwise not be able to work with maybe bigger institutions. So for us, we have put on a lot of shows with local artists that are maybe lesser known. We have also had some flexibility in working with other private museums or other institutions in China or regionally in other parts of the world, but due to COVID, we postponed that. So they were coming, they want to come to Hong Kong for, to put on their shows, but maybe Museum of Arts or M+ is a little too big, or maybe just different topics. So I think continuously we want to play that role, to be flexible, to just work with other organizations who might be similar size or have similar visions.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you about, your own personal collection, where, you say you support, you want to, the criteria is to collect young female artists because you believe that they're under-recognized, which they often are. I want to ask you, what is the difference between your family's foundation and museum on the one hand and your own personal collection on the other?
So if I could put it that way, so our family collections remains privately owned. I think the main reasons being that we want the flexibility in terms of kind of buying things that we like. I think Sylvain said it very well, that when you are collecting for the public, it's very different. So we have continued to keep our family collection as privately owned. We often lend it to the museum or to other institutions as other collectors would. And it's also kind of the foundation of our museum. So it has happened before that, we were planning to borrow a work from another collector, but it fell through. So how about we lend our collection to the show? So sometimes it helps to have that backbone. But the museum itself is under our charitable foundation. And the museum started out as a non-collecting museum because we wanted to be a platform. However, once we have opened and as we work with many artists, we realized that we could afford allocating a small budget annually to collect local artists. So what we have started doing is to slowly build a collection of Hong Kong oil painting. So we chose that because nobody else is really collecting that. I don't know if you have ever seen a Hong Kong oil painting collection. They're relatively inexpensive, but we want to build that collection because we find that to be of for us to have value to the public, because you don't really see that in Hong Kong Museum of Art, you don't see that in other local institutions. So for the museum's collection, we have set that to fill a gap, I would say, within our means, right? My personal collection is just something, as I described before, something that I want to build for myself. So I that's kind of how I categorize them.
You keep it all separate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Chloe was mentioning that, some artists from China couldn't come during COVID. So Sylvain, you have this very novel way of presenting your collection online and through virtual reality, which you established well before COVID, right? You were not doing this because of COVID. You were doing it years before COVID. What led you to launch your collection through these digital platforms? I think you're on mute again.
It's interesting. First, you remember I wrote an article for the ArtAsiaPacific magazine 10 years ago about being digital. But let's go back to other things before that. I think that what will be interesting today is first to give a definition of what is a museum. And because behind this word, there are many ideas. But I would like to be very precise on the definition of a museum, and I would like to read it for you to be very clear. The definition of a museum was given by the ICOM, International Committee of Museums, 50 years ago. And it is said the museum is a non-profit institution that acquires, conserves, research, communicates, and exhibits the tangible and the intangible heritage of humanity for the purpose of education, study, and enjoyment. There is no word in this definition of a physical space. I think this has to be very clear. A museum is about missions. Now, the missions, you can do it through a space, you can do it through a virtual space, you can do it whatever you want, but it's not a physical space. So I think this is very, very important when you understand how a collection can be shared. It's about missions. Now, how these missions are, I shall say, are addressed by DSL, we have decided to be a nomadic collection because it was the way to speak the language of our time in 2005. 2005 was the beginning of YouTube. So we decided to be a nomadic collection, but also to loan all the works of the collection to exhibitions when they were asked. So we are a phygital collection because what we loan is also physical and it's not digital. So this is something very, very important. We are a kind of hybrid collection. The other thing which is very, very important for us is that we have to bring emotions and ideas through objects. The end of the story is not the object by itself. The end of the story is how the object can raise in the eyes of the viewer, can raise a certain number of questions or emotions. So it brings us to the idea that we have to make always a kind of storytelling. We have to create experiences out of the artworks to make the artworks digestible to different types of audiences. So it's much more than just collecting a work. For us, it's much more than that. It's how, as I said to you, to try to always give food for the thought. And we have done this, which was very interesting, in a time where things have moving very, very quickly. China has changed a lot within 2000 and 2015. And we have embraced with the collection this transformation. We also have embraced with this collection the transformation of the audience and the transformation of objects. We have tried, let us be modest, we have tried. And coming back to Chloe, more and more DSL today for us is becoming an entrepreneurial cultural project. And at the head of this project today it's our daughter. And today, our daughter, because she's from your generation, you know, she is capable today, I think, to have the right eyes and the right ideas to bring this collection to a new level, and especially to navigate in this new decade, which will see a huge transformation of the human being. Because what we have seen with the COVID is the nation of a new human being, because today everyone here has a digital twin. And this digital twin will live in internet. It's called the metaverse. You've seen yesterday Microsoft bought a company for $70 billion because they want to go into internet, into the metaverse through gaming. So we are experiencing the transformation of the human being, the transformation of also how people, I should say, connect, and especially with the game. And so we have to embrace all that for the next 10 years. That's make us very happy, as I said to you, because it makes us always be obliged to challenge ourselves, because the status quo is challenging ourselves. And it's not a question of space, it's a question of mindset for me today to have a collection relevant. But once again, it's a personal journey, and we don't have the truth, but it's in this kind of spirit that we would like, I shall say, to try to embrace this new decade.
Yeah. Sylvain, you've told me that you feel the art world is quite old-fashioned when it comes to embracing or adapting to the digital realities of the world today. What are some of the ways you think the field could innovate? How do you get fellow collectors like Petch or Chloe, as well as other art world players, to join you online? And for instance, why should we pay attention to new technologies like the metaverse?
You know, it's a very interesting question, because I'll be perhaps a little bit provocative, and I'm not trying to, you know, to be, you know, there is a big problem in the art world about the idea of an art world cannot only be, I should say, experienced only, it's only can be experienced through contemplation. I think that the art world have sacralized the object in a way that for a lot of people in the art world, the way to look at something is just the physical way. And for them, there is no other way to bring emotion. But let us look a little bit around us. Let us see, for instance, when you go to a theater, you have an emotion, but also you can have an emotion in cinema with a movie. And a movie, it's a digital emotion. When you go to a concert, you have an emotion because of the artist. But if you look at the video clip on YouTube, you can have an emotion. The problem is how you translate things into different types of experiences. And this is the art world has a lot of problems to go ahead of the idea that the art world is an object. And what I can tell you to Chloe and to Petch, and perhaps I will be, you will find me a little bit aggressive. What is the problem today with the museums? Museums, they have walls without persons. The digital world, it's without walls, with persons. So how can we make things win-win? How can we make the old exist because of the new? That's what's happening in the old culture, all the old other cultural goods. Look at the museum, look at the music, like the cinema, like newspapers, books. They have a digital content which is monetized. And this has changed and make all these industries sustainable. Today, the art world, there is no museum in the world which covers its overhead. So this is a huge question. And so I think that when you ask me how you can bring people to the digital, but just look at what's happening around you and try to try to find your own solution. But I think that today it's becoming a necessity to do it.
There's actually a question here that for all of you that says, could you please comment? I mean, since we're talking about new digital realities in the old art world, could you please comment on collecting NFTs to all the panelists? And of course, especially Sylvain, but let's ask Petch and Chloe first, their thoughts on NFT.
What is NFT? I'm very low tech.
Sylvain, do you want to explain what an NFT is? A digital asset?
I think Patch is asking the good question in a certain way. Today, NFT, first, it's very interesting how NFT came out of nowhere. It came from an auction house. It didn't came from a museum. It was people who made $68 million who really put the NFT on the, I shall say, on the table. So it's very interesting. It's not coming from the traditional players from the art world. It's coming from a certain type of players. What I agree with Patch is that this moment, NFT for me is a container. Is a container of something could be a digital artwork, something which is linked with blockchain, something which is linked with crypto money, and something which is linked with the new types of collectors. So this is at this moment, my definition. But NFT has its own validation in this world called the metaverse. Because in the metaverse, you will consume digital objects. And art through the NFT will be the kind of digital objects that will be at a certain time consumed in this metaverse. So this is at this moment, my position on the NFT.
Yeah. So Petch, Chloe, would you forego a physical object in lieu, I mean, and exchange it for an NFT, a digital container?
To be honest, I would have to, again, tell you that my philosophy is a bit different from the rest of you. I'm not collecting for the public. I am collecting for myself, but I hope that the public will enjoy it too. And therefore, no way, because I love physical objects, you know, and it's a bit, I think a bit like an artist. Like if you paint for yourself. If you paint for the viewer, you feel even before you start to paint, you know. So I think of the collection and the museum as a unique vision that you have to be brave and make sure that you're happy about it. And I hope that people will enjoy it too. And so, no digital.
No NFT. Okay, no digital.
Maybe even no selfies and no cameras in the museum too.
Chloe, yeah, to have that timeless experience. Yes. Chloe?
You know, the interesting thing is that I think Sylvain pointed to it as well. You know, the NFT explosion really came as a surprise to me as well, because I think with my tech friends or with some other collectors, we have been talking about digitalizing the experience of museum going, or digitalizing the collection we have of Chinese modern ink for property right purpose and also for public assets purpose. We were discussing that for maybe 5 or 6 years, and suddenly NFT exploded, but not so much based on that, based on universal assets or based on digital property, right? It became like a different art form on its own, and I know I have tons of friends who are buying NFTs who never collected art before. And I think my 2 cents is that I have bought some out of curiosity. You don't know what it is unless you put some money in it. It doesn't hurt unless you have money in it. But at the same time, for me, it's an experience. I haven't got to a place where, to be honest, I will put a lot of money on a piece of NFT art, maybe because I do come from traditional collecting. I do want to touch it. So recently I have realized that painting is not too untouchable for me. I've started collecting sculpture so that I can rub it a little bit and wash it, right? So I think it's personal, as Petch saying, it's your personal preference. But I think the good thing about NFT is that it has attracted a lot of new audiences to the art and the digital space, and for us, for traditional collectors like myself and my family, or some of my friends, or other museum professionals, it forces you to question what we need to be doing in the future. If not to start collecting some of these as a way to represent our times, how do we translate what we have on hands into something that would speak to the generations that are more excited about NFTs than our old paintings, let's say. So my only answer is that it makes me think a lot, but I don't know what is the answer.
Sylvain, yeah, make sure your mute is off.
Elaine, I want to add something, which is, I think, very important, and why the NFT speaks the language of its time. Let us take an object. If you want to sell an object, you have to move it, you have to transport it. It's a very difficult process.
Especially today, yes.
Very difficult process. If you want to sell an NFT, it takes 5 seconds. If you want to collect an NFT, it takes 5 seconds. Most of the people have all their works in a storage. And the only, as I say,
an NFT, you can hold it in your phone.
Only contact that they have with their works is through an image.
Right.
So already people are accustomed to
looking at images.
So the NFT brings a kind of authenticity, a kind of price, make these things happen easier, and you will be able to put them on this new world called the metaverse, or whatever you want. So this is something important. There was a question which is very interesting, which was asked about the fact that in the digital, we cannot have experience altogether. I don't agree with totally with Lévy. He said that in the museum, I can have an experience with the others, and the digital, I cannot have experience. First, I don't agree, because if you go today on platform like Fortnite, you have 400 million people there. And to give you another number, on a fortnight where Ariana Grande made her concert, there were 20 million people attending the concert. So you can have a social life today on the internet. And also what we're doing with our Sensor project, you can visit with your family a space on the digital. So the idea of the museum being only a place where you can have a special, shall I say, a social relation, I think this is moving also. So I think that we're in a world where everything is changing. And we don't have to say yes to everything, but we have to be curious to everything. And this is the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah, one of my friends, she told me, I mean, she's somewhere between my age and your age, Petch and Sylvain. So I asked her about NFTs, and she said, you know what? I look at my phone more than my wall, so I'm okay with owning an NFT because I just keep looking at my phone. It's okay. I enjoy my art this way. So I guess it's, yeah, everybody has different ways of experiencing art, right? I do want to there's another question that I think the three of you could answer. It's about ethics. Does ethics play a role in your collecting practice? What, for instance, is a no-no when dealing with artists or art dealers?
think ethics, sorry if I can answer, ethics play a role in my life, not only in my collection. And my collection is the mirror of myself. And so I apply the same rule in the way I want to build a collection or to meet people through a collection than I do in my life. And for me, there is no difference between the two.
Petch, Chloe, ethics?
I've been cheated by gallerists, maybe one gallerist, but so
And you never went back, or you keep going back?
Well, I don't hate the guy, you know, but I think naturally I have my ethics, but I hope that the galleries will have it too. Don't know if that answers your question.
Chloe?
I think on the similar notes, you know, it just with, as Sylvain said, just with everything we do, there are ethics that are personal and we hold true to our heart, right? But I think on top of that, what I have learned recently, in my experience as running a nonprofit museum, and also by kind of having this, not myself, but my father having this title of a collector. You know, sometimes I don't know how to define that, but you know, everybody's a collector, right? You buy things, you collect things. But once we have been recognized as that, we do feel that sometimes there is a responsibility to not take advantage of some situation. So for example, you know, running a private museum or being recognized as a collector, a lot of artists or a lot of situations, people want to give you free work, right? So that happens a lot, and we have made it sort of quite clear that it's something we avoid doing, because if we want to buy it, we can buy it. If we don't want to buy it, then it doesn't make it better that if you're giving it to me for free. So it's just one thing I'm adding on. I know it doesn't represent all collectors, but we have found ourselves quite often in situations where people want to give us free work, and we do really have to say it's not within our role to take that, especially for someone running a nonprofit museum. So it's just one thing I remember. Yeah.
Sylvain?
I think coming back to the idea of ethics, to tell you the truth, my biggest problem is transparency in the art world. And from time to time, that could be a problem in terms of ethics, because the art world is still not enough transparent. And so from time to time, you can find yourself in a position where you don't know what to do because you don't have really all the information that you need, I shall say, to be comfortable with yourself.
Thanks, Sylvain. I think because there are so many questions, I want to just answer one more question. This one is for Mr. Petch. I want just to clarify by what you mean as timelessness, as timeless. Would artworks that pertain to a specific situation or an event in society, like COVID-themed ones, still possibly qualify as timeless?
Okay, good question and difficult to answer. First impression, I mean, in most cases, probably not, because it's like it's specific to a time or a history. Then, but you have to step back and look at its aesthetics. I avoid collecting works with political or social content. I mean, on purpose. But if the work has like a strong, timeless aesthetics and happen to have some political content, that's fine. I no works come to my mind except Guernica by Picasso. I would love to have Guernica. I cannot afford it, of course, but what I mean is, although it was like a social and politically, inspired work, aesthetically, it's still timeless. Not sure if that answers your question.
So it's basically your own criteria of what timeless looks like. Petch.
Because each collector or even a museum curator will have his or her own taste and eyes, to judge. And I mean, even if you're a museum, you cannot avoid having your own eyes and taste involved in the judgment whether the work is good or not good enough for the museum or to collect or to add to the collection. What I mean is it's very subjective, but I hope that my eyes will be good, and I hope that my taste is good, and also my advisor's eyes and taste. And I believe in his eyes and taste. And I think this is it. My collecting vision is similar, if I may shift your question a bit. I mean, to answer other things you have asked, it's a bit like Peggy Guggenheim. She collected for herself until she knew that she cannot live forever. Then she donated the whole collection to the Guggenheim Museum. You know what I mean?
Sylvain disagrees.
Yeah,
No.
but may I add, I will
Now it's getting fun. The panel has just started, everyone. It's 8 o'clock.
All right.
No, sorry. Perhaps I don't disagree. No, I think not at all. I just want to perhaps to add my comment on what has been said. Peggy Guggenheim today, if you go to Venice, you don't see a lot of works of Peggy Guggenheim. Peggy Guggenheim entered into immortality because of an attitude, because the way she acted as a collector, as a gallerist at a certain time. And this made her collection become famous and become, I should say, timeless. But it's not the artworks. Same thing with the Morozov or Shushkin, the Russian collectors. It's not the artworks by themselves, because Monet, Picasso, all these works we can find in another museum. It's the journey as a collector, the attitude, which can make you timeless. But it's not the artworks of your collection which will make you timeless as a collector. This is for me, and it's very difficult to look at something which could become timeless, because first, we are not timeless ourselves. So I don't really know what will happen after me. But what is important is really, if you really tend to become timeless, either you build a brand, your museum become a brand, either you build something which stay in the history, and you are doing something like this in Thailand. You know, what you're doing today, you are forging the history of contemporary art in Thailand. You are doing the same thing in Hong Kong. And you will become timeless, because what you're doing is something which is not existing and which is very important, the history of contemporary art in your country, but not the works inside, also the way you've done it. This is my point of view.
And I'm just so excited. There's so many questions. I'm going to ask one last one from the audience, which is, beyond different forms of collecting, are you interested in the idea of patronage? What does patronage look like in the digital era / metaverse? Here we are again. Talking about timelessness. Let's think about the future.
Can I tell you something? And then afterwards I will finish. You know, for me, when you collect, and it's very simple, collecting is a very elegant way to burn a fortune. So when you collect, you're always in the mood of patronage. Digital or not digital, look at how collectors are acting generously for the others. And you understand what does it mean to be a patron by just looking at all types of collectors.
Yeah. The three of you are definitely collectors. Thank you. Chloe, Petch, do you have anything?
I don't think of myself as a patron, a collector, yes, but I mean, if you collect works from a good artist or great artist, I collect it not to support him, but because the work is so amazing, I want to have it. Not a real support.
By in Sylvain's eyes, you are still a patron. Yes, by his criteria. And I would have to agree with Sylvain. And Chloe?
And a great work.
You know, Elaine, and I think so. Of course, we support a lot of other art initiatives. So that's the way we do. We have our patronage. But you know, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I saw a last question. Someone asked, "Is the reason for collecting a fear of death?" So I do want.
I didn't see that one. There's more questions are coming in.
I need to answer that one because I think it was maybe I don't know how many years ago when my father and I were talking, and then we were talking to another experienced collector. We were talking about something like that, right? So do we think we're so important that we're going to own these artwork and they are ours and it will be on a tombstone? Here was a great collector who owned all these properties. And I think the answer for us was no. It was my father's friend my father's friend answered very elegantly. He reminded us that these artwork will last much longer than we do, unless we do a poor job of keeping them. So as Sylvain was saying, and as Petch was saying, you know, we're doing this for ourselves so much, burning money elegantly, converting stocks into collections. So why are we doing this, right? So this collector elegantly put it that we are only guardians of these artwork. In a world where they will last much longer than we do, and hopefully we do a fair job of protecting them, hopefully in the interest of the public, if not in the interest of a family or a legacy. So I don't think it's a fear of death in the sense that we want to own something. I think it is in the fear of death that we can only live for so long and we can only take care of this artwork for so long. And maybe we can build a museum or build a digital collection so that other people can enjoy them as well. So I just have to sneak back in.
All right. I think we should wrap it up now. Although I would love to keep the conversation going. But sadly, we've run out of time. Thank you to the audience members who were so engaged and asked questions and comments throughout tonight's panel. And thank you to Petch in Bangkok and Chloe in Hong Kong and Sylvain in Paris for participating in such a stimulating, like very playful conversation on all your work as collectors and Petch, sorry to say, patrons in Southeast Asia, Greater China, and even the metaverse. Last but not least, this is the final weekend of S.E.A. Focus, and I want to encourage all of you to go check it out, whether it's in person in Singapore or online. And to support an artist, a gallery, S.E.A. Focus by acquiring an amazing work by a Southeast Asian artist. Thank you again for joining us. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. À bientôt.